I published my first book, Fearless Passion, way back in 2014, and at that time I was feeling proud. It was quite an accomplishment. Many people want to write a book but never really complete what they set out to do, and I did it. But just after 1 year of its publication, this proud feeling that I had became a feeling of shame, and I tell you why. So the message of this book is to encourage others to overcome their fear and follow their passion. And in the book, I share my journey of how I changed my job from an accountant to an animator. But after being an animator in Malaysia for 6 months, I decided that it wasn't the right job for me. And when the contract ended, I didn't want to find another animation job. Instead, I went back to my ex-company and helped them with the accounting system. At the time, I felt like a fraud. I felt very ashamed of myself, and I felt like I'm a failure. I had told everyone that I was going to follow my passion and do animation. And it's not just people in my company or my family, but it's also my readers. It's a public announcement, a public failure, because I wrote a book about it. And there I was doing the same thing that I used to do and not knowing what I want to do next with my life and my career. I wasn't practicing what I preach. At that time, I just wanted to dig a hole and put my head into it, because in my mind, I could hear other people like my dad saying, "I told you so, you should have reached a stable job for your passion, blah 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 blah." And later I became very depressed, but that's for the next video. In this video, what I want to talk about is imposter syndrome. Whether you're a writer or content creator like me and you felt like a fraud sometimes, or you want to write a book, create a YouTube video, teach or coach someone, and you feel uncomfortable putting yourself out there, or you're just in your job and you feel like you're not good enough or not competent enough to do so, I want to share with you my journey and what I learned over the years. The first thing I want to share is that people aren't as critical as what you have imagined them to be. So our ego has one bad habit. It wants to make everything about us. I went back to my ex-company feeling ashamed, thinking how others will think of me. Will they think I'm a quitter, someone who gives up easily? But what I realized is that other people aren't thinking about whether I succeed or fail. They're just glad that I'm back to help them improve their system and ease their workload. Most of the time, people aren't thinking about you. They're so busy thinking about themselves and how other people are viewing them. They have no time to judge you. That's because everyone has an ego, and that's what the ego does. It's all about me, 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 me. The main protagonist that tells the story in our mind is always ourselves. Other people are just supporting characters. We think people are paying attention to us all the time and judging, but we're just a small little supporting character in their movie. And don't assume you know what other people think of you. You don't know for sure. When I wrote and shared a blog post talking about how I feel miserably, people actually don't think that it's a failure. Instead, they admire my courage to pursue what I love. What you think others might think of you is usually a projection of what you feel about yourself. It doesn't tell you much about the other person. It tells you a lot about your self-perception, your belief system, and what kind of thoughts you have been practicing. Whether they are thoughts that are serving you or whether they are thoughts that are unhelpful. When you have imposter syndrome, it's not that other people think that you're not good enough. It's you who think that you're not good enough. And to be more specific, it's your ego who thinks that you're not good enough. It's your ego who have crafted this identity of being an imposter. Your spiritual self, your higher self, your true self never see you as someone who is inadequate or incompetent. So when you feel like a fraud, what you want to address is the feeling of insecurity and inadequacy you're feeling inside. And shift your perception of yourself from that of your egoic self to that of your spiritual self, and see more of how your spiritual self sees you. The second thing I want to share is never strive to be an expert in something. Instead, be a lifelong learner. On this channel, even though I say I'm a spiritual teacher or I'm a spiritual author, I don't see myself as an expert in spirituality. I'm not a guru, so please don't see me as a guru. I don't know everything, and I'm not always aligned to my spiritual self. I see myself as a work in progress. I'm always learning and discovering new things about myself and others. And I'm eager to share and create this video because I'm eager to share what I've learned. It's not because I have it all together or up there and above everyone else. You don't need to be an expert to teach someone else. Let me tell you a story. After I left the animation industry, I became a tutor. My first student was taking a diploma and needed help in accounting. At that time, I had no experience in the tuition industry. I have no knowledge of the syllabus. So when the agent called me, she was rather skeptical. She wasn't sure that I was competent enough for the job. The student just let go of the previous tutor. She didn't want to recommend another tutor that didn't work. And I understand where she's coming from, but I asked her to let me try. She said, okay, I will let you be the tutor, but you will lower your fee from $60 per hour to $55 per hour. After I had my first lesson with the student, he thought that I was much better than the previous tutor who had 10 years of teaching experience. So he decided to pay me the original rate, $60 per hour instead. And you know why? It's because I didn't speak like an expert. I didn't spill all the terminologies that only an accountant or an accounting teacher will understand. Instead, I used real-life example and analogy to explain the accounting concept. I made it relatable. I taught in his language, and that's why he could understand what I'm trying to say and not the previous tutor. It's definitely not that I know more than the experienced tutor. You know what's funny? I even borrowed the textbook from my student to learn and then teach him. Because the book used a different terminology and method that I was taught in university, and I was unfamiliar with them. My student didn't care how smart I am or how much knowledge I had. What he cared about was whether he could understand what I was teaching and whether he could pass his exam. He cared about the value I was adding to him. People would rather learn from someone who is relatable and a few steps ahead of them in the journey than someone who is up there and expert and unrelatable. So you don't want to wait till you are an expert before you do something. If you find yourself taking courses after courses and not apply anything that you learn or not doing anything, for example, you want to write a book, you gather all the information on how to write a book, and then you don't start, you don't write. What you want to ask yourself is, are you taking all these courses for the information? Or are you afraid to start? Are you afraid of making mistakes? And you're accumulating all this knowledge to make you feel secure and confident enough to start. If it's the latter, it will be better to acknowledge and address this insecurity you're feeling rather than masking it with accumulating knowledge. Because if your foundational state is one of inadequacy, you will find that no matter how much knowledge you gather, you still feel that you're not an authority in this topic. You feel like someone has already said this before or done this before, and I'm just copying and repeating what they've said. Like, who will want to listen to me or read my books? Other people are more capable of sharing this topic than me. What we don't realize is that true authority doesn't come from how much you know. It comes from showing up consistently. If you keep sharing a message with conviction and people receive value from it, people will start seeing you as an authority. And even if you make mistakes, it's okay. People can learn from your mistake. When I write my books, I don't position myself as the expert. Instead, I'm more like a friend sharing my journey with you. In my books, I often tell my reader the mistake I make along the way and what I learned from them. Your journey, your self-reflection is sometimes more valuable than information. So rather than constantly evaluating yourself, whether you're good enough or not, or competent or incompetent to teach someone or help someone, shift your focus to whether it adds value to another person, whether what you do helps the other person or not. If it doesn't, try to understand them better. What do they actually want? What's holding them back? How can I bring them closer to their desire? When you shift your focus on self-evaluation and self-judgment to that of how I can be more of service to others, it takes the stress away from yourself and remove your feeling of being an imposter. So how do I feel about this book now? If there's anything I learned from being a tuition teacher, is that I learned it's okay to tell your student that I don't know, let's figure it out. It's a humbling experience for the ego, but at the same time, it's liberating to be honest and just say out loud that I don't have the answer to everything. It's better than pretending to be perfect or that I'm a teacher and I should know how to do this. That's where the imposter syndrome kicks in. Now, looking back, I'm actually glad that I left the animation industry. If I were to stay as an animator, Yes, I might not appear as a failure to the public, but I will feel like a bigger fraud because I'll be lying to myself. I left the industry not because it was tough and I couldn't handle it. I left the industry because my intuition told me that this job is not a good fit for me. It's not what I truly desire. I studied animation because I was drawn to Pixar's movies such as Finding Nemo, Up, Ratatouille, and Wall-E, but I was more interested in the storytelling, the creativity than the art form itself, animation. There were other mediums that I could express my storytelling and creativity, and I don't want to limit myself to animation. I only realized this when I was working as an animator. When I saw other colleagues geeking about animation and illustration, and I wasn't that passionate at all, I knew that animation is not my passion. If I were to stay as an animator, working in a job that I wasn't passionate about, it would be much worse because it totally negates the message of this book, which is to do something you love. As you know by now, I'm not an expert in spirituality, intuition, mindfulness, emotion, and personal growth. But if you want to hear more of my story and self-reflection, you can subscribe to my channel over here, or you can read my books. The links are in the video description below.